Let's talk about how Jesus himself, 2,000 years ago, handled sexual sin. Now we're taking this from John chapter 8, and you can look at those verses below this video, but first of all, you need to know it's not his sexual sin. Jesus never sinned, so he didn't have any sexual sin. We're talking about how he dealt with it when he was confronted with sexual sin and what exactly he did. And there's 5 things that you're going to notice Jesus did. Okay, let's just go ahead and read this real quick. I've got it here. It says, as he was speaking, the teachers of the religious law and the Pharisees, they brought a woman who'd been caught in the act of adultery, and they put her in front of the crowd. See, they wanted to kind of make a spectacle of this whole thing. And they said, teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. We caught her, which makes you wonder a little bit what they were doing. How did they do that? But anyway, it says that the law of Moses says to stone her. And they said, what do you say? See, they were trying to make this big spectacle of this thing, which was not Jesus's heart, you'll notice here. And they were trying to trap him, and they were trying to use something against him. They had some ulterior motives there. But Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. Okay, so that's the first thing. Jesus paused. He didn't jump to conclusions. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. He stooped. We don't know what he wrote down, but we do know this, is he paused, he stopped, he thought. And that's a really good thing to do for you. If you know someone that's struggled with some sexual sin, probably the best thing you can do is just to stop and pause. Don't jump to any conclusions. Stop and think and pause. Okay, back to the text. It says that they kept demanding an answer. And so finally he stood up again and he said, all right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. So that's number 2. He addressed the accusers first. Notice, he didn't really even address the woman yet. He was addressing them because in this particular instance, they're the ones that had their own sin to deal with, and he addressed them first. And you can go back and look and see, he stooped back down and he started writing again in the dust. And who knows, maybe what he was doing was writing the names of all of the people that those guys had been unfaithful with. Or maybe he was just writing the names of some of their sins down, greed and anger and jealousy and gossip. Who knows what he was writing down? We don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us, but we do know that Jesus addressed the accusers even before he addressed the person with that sexual sin. Okay, back to the text, and then it says that the accusers heard this and they all slipped away. They all dropped their stones and they went away because they weren't without sin, and so they didn't condemn him. And it says that Jesus stood up and he said to the woman, where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you? And that's the third thing we see that Jesus did, is Jesus didn't condemn her outright. He didn't start throwing stones at her. He didn't start, throwing these scripture arrows and darts at her. He didn't condemn her, even though she had been caught, even though she knew she was wrong, she was in sin. So you can see the heart that Jesus had for this woman. And really that leads to the fourth thing that we see that Jesus is doing here, is that he got personal with her. He didn't try to address this sexual sin in the context of a crowd. He waited until the crowd was gone, and then he started to talk to her about the sin. This is good for you in your life. If you've got someone in your life that you know is involved in sexual sin, pornography, or whatever else it is, one of the best things that you can do is check the way that you approach it. Don't approach it in a crowd. Don't call them out in front of all their friends. Get one-on-one. This is really more of a mentoring conversation than anything else. That's what Jesus did. But back to the text for our last thing. So Jesus didn't condemn her, but look at what he said at the very end. He said, go and sin no more. So the fifth thing is that Jesus didn't condone her sin. He didn't at the end of the day say, oh, go do whatever you want. Who cares? It's no big deal. No, he said, listen, this was sin. It was wrong. You shouldn't have done it. He called it out in that private way. He showed that he had a heart for her, that he loved her. He hated the sin, though, and he was willing to call a spade a spade. He said, this was sin. Don't do it anymore. Stop it. Stop doing this. And don't forget, guys, if you're helping someone with sexual sin, all these other 4 things, those are good. Jesus did those things, but don't forget to get to the 5th thing. And the 5th thing is this: don't condone it. Call it what it is and help that person begin to make better choices and live to honor God.